Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Pat Hilton and Zach Hoffman with your Monday update.
What's happening, Pat?
Dude, it's an awesome day. How are you, sir?
Doing excellent. It's a little rainy where I'm at, but all is well.
Oh, man. Perfect weather here in Texas. A little rainy down there in Florida, but we've got the E-Firm report coming to you, folks.
Let's
all
go.
things marketing. And Zach, break down why we're doing it this way moving forward, because you're such a branding visionary and such a creative innovator that you are zeroed in on what you want to cover. And I love that. Explain to people why this is so important when you're podcasting to make every single second count and why we're doing it this way.
Well, yeah, so we're positioning, we do service a lot of law firms, so we want to start bringing more content, more relevant information to lawyers and attorneys as to how they're marketing and approaching their advertising. As well, they are one of the larger direct response mediums out there, so the lead generation that they do to convert to end clients does apply to a lot of industries and verticals just across the board.
So good. Well, let's hop into it. What do we got on the bullet points today, Zach?
For sure. So we got, essentially, three topics that we'll hit into. The first topic is going to be when you have a big settlement, what to do with that, how to announce it, how to get it out there. Second is how, when you're looking at marketing, it should be a 360 approach. There should be a number of different mediums all working together, and there shouldn't be marketer and advertisers smashing out other mediums. They should be acknowledging the fact that all mediums do have their, respect and placement within, the environment. And then when it comes to third, placement is everything. It goes back to the old saying, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, didn't make a noise at all. So I love/hate hearing buyers say, oh, but the rep is giving me placement here, there, and they're digital. So I'm like, dude, may as well flush that money down the toilet, because the fact is placement is everything.
It is. I mean, if you think about, again, I always go back to music, but if you're opening for a group that you sound nothing like, that audience is going to boo you off stage. You don't sound anything like them. Britney Spears isn't going to open for a rap artist. A rap artist may open for Britney, but the same thing around. You've got all these major tours, and the way that they match up all those bands and all those artists is so that it sounds the same. Britney Spears isn't going to play at a metal concert.
But also, if you're not playing with the best of artists, you might not get heard. So it's really important.
Very true.
When you do have that big opportunity to potentially, pair up with a specific artist, like I saw Red Hot Chili Peppers on one of their latest tours, and anybody who was able to open for them had access to an audience and a crowd that they solely never had. And I mean, the band that opened for them, I don't recall who it was, but I mean, those guys hadn't had a band, hadn't had an audience for at least 15 or 20 years since they had their last hit.
Unbelievable.
So, it's the positioning, it's who you're performing with, and making sure that, you're getting that placement, so you're actually getting seen.
Correct.
It goes back to the Super Bowl ads and, placement being everything.
Super Bowl ads. And then when we searched for some of those ads right here on the show, we couldn't even find some of the company's pages. We couldn't find their websites, and we couldn't find their ads. It was crazy.
We can go off on some general tangents in a little bit. I was even thinking, there's a lot of mediums out there that should really be advertising and marketing to get people, heads in the beds. That's what they call it in travel and hospitality, because once, a ship has sailed, or once a, hotel is, closed for the doors for the night, if there's no heads in the beds, you lost money, right? So when you look at movie theaters, MLB, a lot of sports games out there, they don't do a lot to market and advertise to get families and, their audience out there outside of, leaving it up to the actual movies themselves or the actual game itself. They should be selling the experience and selling more inspiration to get people out there. That's where they should be probably spending at least 20-30% of their budgets as on experiential advertising to actually encourage people to look out for when that next opportunity, does avail itself.
And this is what caught your eye about the legal marketing, is how well some of these people are doing it. So let's take that and kind of break into what we're talking about here in this niche of legal marketing, and why some people are catching your eye and some people aren't.
Yeah.
Or they're catching your eye and you're like, oh.
There's a lot out there, you sometimes hear some or you see some and you're like, who are they buying from, or who's
Right.
selling them this overweight shit? Or like, you kind of like, you're just like, man, like if only like an ethical, kind of like rep got in there and kind of like, taught them the ways or how the path of where they should be going. Because, you see a lot of like unweighted marketing and advertising. And then you also see like not a lot of tracking in an environment
Mm,
when almost anything and everything should be tracked. And if you're saying, oh, I have a vanity number, well, guess what? You could buy 3 to 5 vanity numbers and apply them to different mediums and actually have an ROI tied to a specific channel or medium. There's
right.
only, I would say, a handful of phone numbers, like maybe 2 to 5 phone numbers I've seen in the wild that are like the holy grail of phone numbers. That'd be like, yeah, it's hard to convince you to deviate away from that number because that number is just that good. But like I said, they're not commonplace. So, when you hear some of these advertisers out there with their alphanumeric phone numbers and different things, like, dude, like buy some repeaters, buy some 000s, like get out there, invest a little bit more in some tracking numbers, and then have tracking numbers to apply to different mediums. So in the long run, you'll save money because the vanity number is not going to cost more than you might be pushing into a specific medium to get those impressions and those reps.
I love that. And vanity numbers are everywhere, especially in my category of social media. And as you know, I mean, we could go in and we could juice anything we really wanted to make it look bigger than it really is, but that is not going to convert. You want to really reach people that are interested in the topic. You want to reach people that are interested in what you are serving. Whether, especially
Yeah.
if you're a law firm, you want to make sure that you're focusing on the people that need your service, the people
Well,
that need your help, right?
the vanities being the 800 toll-free numbers or
Got
888
it.
or 800. Or if you're in a specific market like South Florida and you're not marketing a 305, like, there's like 305 is like internationally known. If you're in New York and you're not marketing a 212, but those markets are also used to like toll-free numbers as well. But essentially there's some lockdown like area code numbers still in a lot of these markets. And then when you're looking at like the 800s, 888s, like, there's some, like I said, there's some really great numbers out there. It might take a dollar or two to invest in them. But I would say a lot of traditional reps do not like that because they lose their ability to sell like the branding of a phone number. Well, I hate to tell you, like as soon as you stop advertising that phone number, reality is it kind of disappears into the night. So you may as well apply a tracking number to those creatives that you actually can get some,
Mm.
granular, weight as to what they actually are contributing.
I love it, dude. I love that. I mean, dude,
For
yeah. I
sure.
mean, again, folks, if you can see, Zach's got a really wide array of branding and expertise. I'm mainly a social media guy, producer, and it really helps to have both because me is
Yeah.
I'm always gung ho, post, get engagement, create clicks, and you're always like, hey, let's take what we created, let's push it this way, that way, the other way, so we can maximize those conversions. The organic combined with the paid is something Zach's always been really good at. That's why he's been around for 25 years.
Yeah, no, well, 20 plus years, but definitely, been in the game a long time, seen a lot of advertising from a wide variety of areas and also managed budgets and, 7+ figures a month for
Right.
clients. So it's like, we've seen it. We've also done the marketing for ourselves at Exults to actually see how it feels. It's really hard to like actually pitch and position something that you've never actually felt yourself before. And there's a lot of advertisers and marketers, well, they call themselves advertisers and marketers that never have even put a penny of their own dollars into a radio ad, a television ad, a digital ad. So, like,
Mm.
how are you ever going to know what it should feel like on the other side, other than what you might have read in a book or watched on YouTube? So, the fact is like getting your skin in the game and actually playing the game, being in the game. There's a lot to be said for that. So, I do encourage other agencies and advertisers out there to put their own dollars into a game as to where they're telling their clients to go because it means a lot. It should mean a lot. It should mean a lot. It's cutting your teeth as to what you're actually doing.
Totally. And I think it's important for people to hear about what the options are too. Let's say I'm a law firm, right? And I've got a book of clients. I've got some incredible representation, some legal representation, but I want more. What's my first step?
Well, the fact is, essentially what happens is they typically will come into a settlement or, get, a bank to provide them like a loan or a line of credit. Yeah, and they want to invest it back into the practice. Essentially, some first steps, I would say, the most effective cornerstone anybody can have in this advertising and marketing environment is an effective website, followed by the actual social handles and social mediums being updated with content that reflects the brand that they're trying to get out there. And then essentially, then they can start to pad it with other assets or other messaging and marketing to bring people into those websites to actually get them to call and become leads and opportunities to convert.
Yeah, that's solid. That's solid. It's a 360-degree dynamic there. Yeah, I mean, you got to be
Oh,
working on it
for
all the
sure.
time.
Yeah, but essentially, yeah, as we talked about briefly before this, there's about, I would say, 90 to 180 degrees of it that are in today's era being covered in that digital realm, where all of that stuff really has to check out before you even should be considering spending another penny in these other environments. There's not a lot of consumers doing things outside of this. And even when they're going to convert or fill out a form or make a phone call, they're going to be picking up this bad boy, so
Yep.
it's like, they're going to be actually, calling or texting. Yeah, there's a lot of ways for them to engage with brands, but it all comes down to the mobile experience as to where they go next.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily, them speaking into thin air. And, a lot of clients that we represent, the reality is somebody actually walking into their physical office or their footprint these days is not what it used to be.
And how do companies adapt to that mobile friendly website? Because a website on my desktop is a lot different than a website on my phone.
Yeah, it's the mobile responsive environments. It's really, I would say with websites looking at like designing first for a mobile experience and then going into, the desktop and looking at that because for a lot of, law firms and like B2C type markets, we'll see essentially 80+% of the traffic being mobile versus on the desktop. The challenge is the end buyer that's actually at the firm might be checking the desktop or on their computer when they're at their office to see what it actually looks like when the reality is they should be really auditing it really effectively on the mobile device and the phone and what's happening there.
Absolutely. And I wonder, again, just from my perspective, what is the conversion between mobile and desktop? I would probably guess if you're someone that is looking to hire a lawyer or a law firm, you're going to jump on the computer as well. That's again, this
Yeah.
is my guess. What do you think that would look like from your
I
analytics?
think the reality is the engagement and the action is happening on the phone,
Got it?
and probably doing a Google search or they just had a horrible incident happen, so they're in an accident or an injury. Basically, the challenge in marketing in that medium is as much repetitions as you may have had. Most consumers have an adrenaline rush when they actually like get into an accident, and the only thing they
Mm,
really care about is their health or like how they're going to get help after that. So almost everything that they've seen to date basically kind of like backs out of their mind. Like they haven't even, they don't even have that recall that they might have, in other situations. So it's unless you're Coca-Cola and McDonald's, it's kind of hard to really, break into that impact of, that occurrence.
no, that makes sense. And I mean, when you're on the side, standing on the side of the highway, you want help immediately. You're going to go straight to Google or wherever your search device is, and you're going to ask for a lawyer, a law
Yeah, I
firm
mean,
lawyer.
look, some of the steps are you're probably, going to be calling for help from like police or, like emergency response. You're probably going to be tow truck drivers probably going to come out to the scene.
Yep.
Yeah, you might end up at the hospital. There's so many things that could happen. So, another thing that people need to consider is that, a loved one could be doing that search versus, the actual injured consumer themselves. So it's not always, that end user that, you might be expecting.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love the way that you're able to break this stuff down. What other bullet points do we got for folks out there today?
Well, yeah, so we wanted to talk about, when you have a big settlement or ways to get a settlement announcement out there. It's a great way to get some like content and, really like hit your networks.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, if you have a big settlement or even, an average settlement, doing a post about the amount itself and then the type of injury or incident it might have been related to, the potential attorney or lawyer that represented the case, along with your brand. So getting that out there as a social post and content and creative is really critical. You could also bring it onto your website. And then if you can even get a review or a video with the consumer itself, that does speak volumes. And then from there, you can also do a press release about the particular settlement, just to kind of tickle the search engines as well as the AI indexes that you are getting relevant information that's timely out there, and essentially nurture the search engines and the AI engines back into your website. Yeah, we do have to consider that Google is just as big of like an AI engine as they are a search engine right
Hmm.
now. So hitting it with relevant and timely information is critical, and getting those settlement announcements out there on social media. There's, no easier layup from a perspective of just, announcements that you could be making on a regular basis.
Yeah, I love that. I think that just keeping your pages updated is essential and moving
Yeah.
that over to your website so that, I mean, your blog or whatever can continue to be ranking. Like you said, all the stuff that shows up on Google is now showing up about me and you on ChatGPT. So like we're already there.
Oh, for sure. And if you had a solid Google presence and continue to, essentially they're picking you up in the AI searches and those zero SERPs as well. So, an effective SEO presence is still getting you ranked for all, artificial intelligence and, specific placements as well. So,
Hmm.
like I said, getting settlement announcements out there is, an easy win. And that can apply to a number of different, verticals and industries. Happy customers lead to, more happy opportunities.
And in your opinion, what's the best way for people to get that information from the client? Is it pictures? Is it videos? Is it all of it? I mean, written testimony. How do you think the best way is for a law firm to showcase the client
Yeah,
results?
so at times, a client will come to the actual office to pick up a check or, essentially engage with the firm at that endpoint. So it is an actual opportunity then to, convert them, at that stage when you have them in the office or, physical presence. It's definitely, an opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, you notice that in lots of other industries, whether you're closing on a home or you're doing landscaping, whatever, and people are in the office. I like that, and you can physically have that conversation or take that picture or get that representation. So I love that.
For sure, for sure.
What else we got,
So,
Zach?
yeah, so going into the next, bullet point item here, definitely, I saw somebody out there in the sphere saying this particular medium works and everything else is a nice to have.
Oh
The
boy.
reality is that shit ain't true. Real marketing and advertisers know it's a 360 approach. If you've ever like ethically spent and managed budgets for clients across different mediums, you know that there is more than just digital.
Hmm.
And I say digital because digital is the forefront here in 2025. And everything else, essentially, does support in a lot of ways. Now, if you do have effective traditional advertising and marketing campaigns, they will feed your digital and they will all feed full circle. Challenges is digital is challenging to actually manage effectively. Google Ads is challenging to manage effectively. It changes quite frequently. Same thing with Meta Ads, as well as doing SEO and having an effective website to essentially keep up with how consumers are engaging with specific mediums. And then when we're looking at the mediums that go beyond digital, you have, billboards, you have, traditional outdoor placement. So, essentially when consumers are driving or have a full car, being able to get that brand positioning out there when they're on those critical roads, out there like on the highways or getting off on high traffic exits, making sure that they can see it. And then after those mediums, you have TV and radio, but the challenge with some of those traditional mediums like TV and radio, it's no secret to the public that radio has been bailed out by the government a number of times. It's actually even hitting the media right now that, essentially public radio is going to be taking a potential hit, which is going to impact that entire ecosystem. And without a lot of government announcements, essentially those mediums wouldn't be able to support themselves. Whereas digital footprints like Google and Meta are way more profitable than almost any other business out there. And this ain't because the marketing medium doesn't work. This is because essentially marketers and advertisers that have an effective presence on Google, Facebook, Instagram, they just can't get enough of it, right?
Mm,
So, when you're looking at those other mediums, they're essentially kind of like ancillary support to really feed the coal into that digital engine and really amp it to that next level.
totally. I mean, when you talked about billboards and you showed me some billboard stuff that you were looking at and doing some stuff with, I didn't even consider how many of those I've actually seen driving down the highway.
Yeah, there's,
need legal assistant, or this happened, or whatever.
yeah.
Injury lawyers, personal injury. Did you have a car wreck? X, Y, and Z. And I never even thought about how many of those I've seen driving across the country until you brought it up. And some of them are just cringe.
Well, I mean, some of them are great too. I mean,
True.
you're based in Dallas and Houston, so you do see a lot in the Texas markets
Right.
in particular. And typically, some of your leaders you see out there with real, effective placements when it comes to like static billboards.
Yep.
They do sell digital billboards, but it's understand that digital billboards are as rapidly as the billboard company can do change outs of their static environment is as fast as they're going to be pitching digital because they get more money per a minute per hour by running digital placements versus static placements. And that's why you're seeing essentially a lot of these conversions going down. But if you
Interesting.
can still get a static billboard in today's environment on, specific driving routes or specific exits, and those things are essentially priceless in a lot of ways. And if you go to try to get a contract from the broker, they might be, essentially locked up for months or even years and, untouchable in a lot of situations.
That's crazy. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
you
And
won't hear that from a lot of mediums, whereas they're like, "Hey, you can't buy that for another 2 years." Like, you're not gonna, essentially call a radio show and be like, "Hey, can I get that 30 seconds to 6 second spot?" They'll be like, "Yeah, sure." But if you're like, "Hey, can I get that billboard off that major exit on I-95?" and be like, "Oh, sorry, that contract is like taken up for like, 2 or 3 years."
interesting.
There's been some like rare times in, history where a lot of the boards opened up, such as, when COVID happened or even when you see a lot of like corporate budgets backing out, that's when some of them essentially have opened up, but it doesn't happen all the time to the great placements. And if you have the opportunity to have five billboards versus one billboard in a placement where everybody in town drives to,
Right.
I'll go with that one placement versus the five all day every day.
That's huge. And that's huge information for anybody that's looking to get into this, or if you're a law firm. I mean, yeah, you want to be on social. Yeah, you want to be on websites, but billboards, especially locking down something for that amount of time. I mean, what does that do for competitors? I mean, if you got a great billboard and a great ad and everybody's seeing it for multiple years, how do you think that boxes out the competition, or does it?
I mean, look, there's a lot of the challenge with marketing and advertising. A lot of people don't understand is it's not necessarily a sprint. It's essentially a marathon. So you have to be in it for the long haul, and you have to be able to spend dollars for a long period of time within your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
But make sure you budget effectively and creatively because as they say, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, did it make a noise at all?
Right.
Yeah, and that's the reality when it comes to marketing and advertising is placement is everything.
Yeah, that's huge. And I encourage everybody out there. I know we do get general sometimes. I think that's important to just be relatable. But no matter
Yeah.
what you're doing, make sure that that placement is there. And as you can even see from the evolution of Zach and I's streams, how he's really pushed us into that one niche that we really want to focus on and communicate with. And I think it's important to have that guideline and that baseline, no matter who you're working with, so that you understand as a service provider, how am I serving Zach, or how am I serving this person? Or if you're a law firm, how am I serving my client base? Not only that, but how am I attracting more of those people with the language that I'm using in my content and my advertising?
Look, these mediums come down to lead generation and then conversion, and that's the bottom line is lead gen to conversion. The other thing that I, really, stress to marketers and advertisers is don't be necessarily cheap on the creative and the content, right? Like if
Mm,
you're willing to spend, 10, 20, 30, 50, $100,000 on a 30-second, 60-second spot that you're going to be putting on like, one of the main TV networks, put that much into social media piece of content and creative that you're going to actually, put out there, or, come at it with the angle of, I'm going to produce this 15, 30-second spot, and then I'm going to use meta ads to actually test which gets the most engagement, and then
Mm.
take that 30-second piece and utilize it in your traditional spots,
Yeah, I like that.
because that's going to give you a lot of data and action to really like understand how the consumer might be resonating with the messaging, and help you, craft where your creative, should be and could be.
Dude, that's good stuff because I think that as users we think, hey, if it's not a certain way, we don't post it. If it's not this, we don't post that. X, Y, and Z, and we sometimes overthink posting or putting something out there because we think people aren't going to like it, but we don't know if anyone's going to like it until we post it. And then if
Well,
they
yeah.
love it, we want to run that as a paid promotion.
Yeah, and well, we've had that discussion before. I mean, sometimes, essentially there's almost no rhyme or reason as to why, particular pieces of content hit, but you can continue to streamline with data and engagement data as to what will hit into the future. Even Mr. Beast has said it himself. I mean, that's why he produces so much content, but he's always studying the data on the intro and then essentially what hits within the videos and, what keeps people sticky into the content itself. And he's a master of content.
Yep.
So there's a lot of ways to essentially kind of like craft messaging, and essentially, the beauty of social and these environments from the digital realm, even YouTube, you can test various videos and see what the engagement is, and then take those videos and then carry them into your traditional mediums and your platforms. Even if you want to test a radio ad, you could take radio ad messaging of 30 seconds, 60 seconds, apply it to some video or still imagery and make something that, is kind of sticky, and test it with the consumers where the consumers are on, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and then essentially take that to the traditional, mediums, go forward.
I love it, dude. I love it. I mean, it's the mixing and matching here is great because again, I think people think it's got to be all social media or all your website or all
No,
billboard or all TV or all radio.
that's essentially the advertising marketing broker you should run from. The one that's like, oh, it's all this or it's all that. It ain't an all or nothing game. Neither is, playing an effective game of poker. You don't go all in on, the first hand you see. The reality is you have to be testing and you have to be
Mm,
getting out there on multiple mediums, and you have to be building a brand, essentially that Sun Tzu art of war, where it feels like essentially the consumer is seeing you everywhere, and being hit with everything, essentially. So they think they see you here, there, and everywhere. And essentially, you also have to pay attention to where your consumer could potentially be, and make sure that you're in the environments that, your consumer could, one, afford to actually be at,
yep.
and then two, that they actually, cross those gates to actually attend or be there. So it's really, making sure you're in, as they say, when you're networking from building your business, you got to be in the right rooms. Same thing when you're trying to, essentially get new customers and clients, you got to be in the right environments.
Dude, it's awesome. That's awesome. And so, what are some suggestions for people that are coming into the game this year? They want to get more clients. They want to represent more people. They want to showcase their settlements. What are some tips you can give them today that they can implement immediately this week if they see the clip?
Yeah, for sure. So, if you have a specific settlement out there, start to get those settlement announcements out there. Start to like post about them. Of course, check the local bar rules, but highlight the big settlements that you might have had, or specific settlements, just to show the continued traction at the firm and what you're doing for your clients and your customers. When you're looking at your marketing and advertising, analyze it from a 360 perspective and start to see, how everything gels together and what is the real intention of your message. And also, don't underinvest in vanity numbers. Like, if you have opportunities to essentially add more vanity numbers to your arsenal, don't necessarily be shy with that, because you can apply those as tracking numbers to different points of your funnel. And
Mm,
then when it comes to placement, look, placement is everything. There's a reason for Super Bowl ads are charging $3 to $4 million for 30-second, 60-second spots. So when it comes to your local advertising and marketing, don't necessarily bite on like this run of the market or the remnant inventory. Essentially, make sure you're getting some prime inventory. There's a reason it's called prime inventory, so that people do see your message and that you get the best bang for your buck when it comes to marketing and advertising. Because there's nothing like drive time placement or essentially, specific high traffic, exits or, really particular areas, the evening news, when people are actually watching and engaging and the consumer that you want has their eyes, to that screen. Even when it comes to paid ads on Google and Meta and other environments, day parting is critical and, leads to a lot of success for our clients. Don't be advertising 24/7 if you can't service them 24/7. And even humans, we all have this animal instinct in a way. It's like we are most prone to take active action typically during business hours, which we've all been, essentially trained to do, which are like 9 to 5 in your markets, or, essentially 9 to even 2 o'clock, depending on the consumers that you're looking for.
So break down what day parting means. I think I know what you mean, but for someone that hears that, how can they insert that and integrate that this week as well? Because I thought that was a nice
day
point.
parting is looking at your ad schedule. So if you're running particular ads right now, you can actually ask to look at what's the actual performance by day or by hour of my advertising? You might find that on the weekends, you just don't generate as many leads as you might on a Monday, Tuesday. So you want to be spending those dollars most effectively on Monday, Tuesday and cap your exposure on Saturday, Sunday. You might even want to pause your ads. We do have a lot of ads that are essentially typically paused late night hours or weekends, because we find that even if a consumer sees the brand, they're not necessarily going to take that next step action to make that call or fill out a form.
Yep. I love that. You want to break it up so that you maximize your ad spend. I mean, if you're spending money, you want the best, ROAS you can get.
Yeah, for sure. And you want to, be advertising and marketing when people are, going to be converting. And if you are running an organization, a company, a law firm, you're going to have the data to support that. You're going to know when you have the most intake, and you're also going to know when you're seeing the best leads. So, to nurture and really, harness in on those hours, I assure you the top advertisers and marketers in your market are ad scheduling and day parting, because they know when those consumers are essentially going to ring that bell for you.
So good, dude. All right, what else we got, Zach? What else we got for the folks today on Monday?
Well, we got big week ahead,
Yep.
essentially. But it's always great to get on here on Mondays with you to talk shop.
Yeah, and I think this has really kind of helped us not only as friends and as partners that work together on a lot of different projects, but it also helps us brainstorm what we need to improve on every single week. And as a podcaster, as a producer, you've helped me grow a lot with the width and the depth of how I'm looking at the branding and the creative, on top of just making the content, but really making it custom to someone like yourself or to someone like clientels that you're speaking to. You really want to make sure that people can align with that content. And so if you are a law firm, how do you really want to portray that message? Like you were saying earlier, you want to attract a certain type of person this week.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're getting that next, potential case for, wherever you might practice. If it's injury, if there's a victim out there, you want them taking you seriously and understanding that you're going to get them the biggest settlement for their fight. You want to make sure that you're the one that they want to represent.
Yep, that's so good. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Monday, a beautiful Monday, and my system is so juiced up it doesn't even want to stop. So I'm gonna close it up from here.
Just want some more E-firm report.
It wants some more E-firm report. It's like I'm gonna lock up everything on you. So we'll see you on the next one, folks. We love you and appreciate you. Dominate.
For sure. Have an awesome week.